As usual, Harvey sat in his recliner, beer in hand, watching a baseball game on the big screen TV. Betsy went upstairs after dinner. He had no idea what she was doing. He didn't care. As far as he knew, it was just another night at home. However, shortly before 7 as the doorbell rang. Before Harvey could get up, Betsy shouted from above, "Harvey, could you open it, please?" "Certainly. I was going to do it anyway." He walked to the door and opened it to see a well-dressed man who was unfamiliar to him. "Yes. Can I help you? I hope you're not selling anything." "No." "I'm here to pick up Betsy." "For what?" "We have a date." Harvey's eyes bulged. "Are you and my wife Betsy on a date?" "Yes." Harvey stood there for a moment, trying to figure out what to do. "I'll call her." He went to the foot of the stairs and shouted up, "Betsy, your cavaltor is here." He expected her to ask, "What date?" or "This isn't really a date." Instead, she said, "Tell him I'll be right there." Harvey just stood there wondering what was going on. When she entered the living room, she was wearing a short evening dress that showed off a lot of cleavage and had a lot of makeup on her face. Harvey asked, "Betsy, tell me, what the hell is going on?" "I'm going on a date." "Married women do not go on dates with anyone other than their husband." "I'm going. I'm tired of spending my evenings watching you drink beer and watch curling or some other exciting sport. The most I want from you is a burp or a fart. And you don't even apologize anymore when you do it. When was the last time we did something exciting? If you can't give me any attention or the occasional chance to have fun, I'll find someone who can." She poked her index finger into his chest for emphasis. "Now don't wait for me. If I'm lucky, I might not be back until morning." She left, slamming the door behind her. Betsy sat down in waiting her car and told the driver to move. Once he was away from home, he stopped, and they both started laughing. Betsy said, "I wish I had a photograph of his facial expression. It was priceless. If that doesn't make him go from being a sloth to being a normal person, I don't know what will. Don't you think this might make him angry and make the situation worse?" "I doubt it. He'll probably just sit there and wonder what happened. I'll be back before he gets too upset. I don't think he would consider divorce that quickly, but I'm willing to take the risk. I probably shouldn't have added that part about not being home until tomorrow. Well, it's too late now. Given the way our marriage is going, I think I would rather get a divorce than continue like this. Damn him. I love this idiot to death, but I just wish he would care more about me and us. Well, go around the block. Let's come back and I'll see how he's doing." After driving around the area, Betsy and her beau pulled into the driveway and parked. Harvey didn't run outside like Betsy had hoped. She walked in and didn't see him in the living room, even though the TV was on. She quickly looked around the ground floor and went upstairs. He's gone. She then called him on his mobile phone. She heard the bell. Betsy ran up and saw his cell phone on the nightstand. His wedding ring lay nearby. She quickly looked around the room. Several of his personal belongings were missing. Oh shit! Betsy ran downstairs to tell her friend what had happened and to check if Harvey's car was in the garage. She disappeared. The man asked, "Where do you think he is?" "He probably went to the bar to get drunk. In the worst-case scenario, he might even spend the night in a motel. I imagine him sulking like a little child. He'll pay for it when he comes back and forgets my joke. On the other hand, his departure may be for the best after all. If he feels bad because he made me go to such lengths to motivate him, I don't mind letting him continue to feel bad a little longer." Harvey did not return or call that night or the next morning. Later the next day, when Betsy couldn't take it anymore, she called Harvey's personal secretary long before he was due back from lunch. "Barbara, please connect me with my husband. Nothing will work out." "Betsy, what the hell is going on? Harvey comes staggering in this morning and tells me to shut up and listen." He tells me that he is taking the day off because he has a lot of personal things to take care of. He then asks me who handles our company's health insurance. I told him the name of the girl from HR who deals with health insurance. This helped him. He didn't want to talk to me anymore. He left without saying a word of gratitude or anything. This doesn't sound like Harvey at all. Do you know what happened to him? Did any close relative die or something? I am what happened to him. I pulled a trick that backfired. Once I talk to him and kiss his ass, I hope he gets back to normal. Now, could you transfer me to that girl from HR? Certainly. Human Resources, Rhonda. I would like to talk to Sylvia, please. She is currently undergoing orientation with a new employee. Can anyone else help you? Can anyone tell me what Harvey Strickland did in your HR department today? I can look through his file, but I need his permission to give you any information. I am his wife. Can you tell me anything? I can look at your coverage according to his policy. Wait, let me see. It's a coincidence. We should have contacted you today anyway. You should receive official notice in the mail that you are no longer covered by your husband's health insurance. You can keep your coverage for 180 days before it expires if you pay off the debt. That's the only thing he changed. Stunned, Betsy simply sobbed, "Thank you," and hung up. Why did Harvey take me off his health insurance? And then it dawned on her. She immediately went to her computer to check their online bank accounts. Half the money was withdrawn from my checking and savings accounts. Oh shit. He is in the process of divorcing me. Betsy couldn't decide what to do next. She thought for a moment before her phone rang. It was their life insurance agent and family friend Larry. "This is Betsy. Hello, Larry." "Betsy, can you tell me what the hell is going on?" "Harvey came here, canceled the automatic payout on your life insurance, and changed the life insurance beneficiary to the girls. No money should go to you. In addition, automatic withdrawals for life insurance payments were transferred to the new account. He said he was sure that's how he wanted it to be. I will have to send you a formal notice of the change of beneficiary and the termination of your life insurance benefits." "I'm sorry. I'm guessing you guys must be growing apart." "Betsy, I'm sorry about this. Please come see me as soon as possible so your life insurance doesn't expire." "Am I right about you two getting a divorce?" "Yes, thank you. I can't tell you anything more now." "But you really didn't tell me anything." "Yes." She hung up. 2 minutes later, their lawyer, neighbor, and friend Doug called. Betsy replied stupidly. "Hello?" "Betsy, this is Doug. Can you tell me what the hell is going on?" "Harvey came here and changed his will so that the children get everything from him and you get nothing. He also removed you from the list of people who could become his medical assistant. He refused to tell me why and said he didn't care whether I told you or not. He then asked me for a referral to a family lawyer. I'm guessing that you two have had some serious problems and are considering divorce. Look, I can always change things if you guys get back together. I'm really sorry this is happening. Marilyn and I think very highly of you both. I have to run now, but I wish you both the best," Betsy answered weakly. Okay. The next call was from their twin daughters, who were in college together. "Mother, what the hell is going on? Dad called us all devoted to you. He said that you date and have sex with other men. He then told us that he was going to stay away for a while so that he could have the freedom to date other people before the divorce. He said he took care of our future college expenses. We tried to ask questions, but he ignored us. He told us to remember that he loved us and hung up. Mom, we are afraid that Dad will hurt himself. Can you tell us what happened to make him so depressed?" "I'm the idiot who made him depressed, and I'm trying to find him so I can apologize. The problem is that I can't find it. Maybe I can try. Hey, I got another call. Maybe it's him. Call us back." "Hello, Harvey?" "No. This is your mother-in-law, Doris. What the hell is going on? My son called me crying like a baby. He said something about you sleeping with a group of men in some nightclub. He seemed drunk, so I wasn't sure how true his story was. All I know is that he was very depressed. Anyway, he said he was going to solve the problem by giving you your freedom. The worst part is that he thanked me and his father for raising him right. He then apologized for betraying his upbringing by letting us down. He said goodbye. I didn't like his tone. He hung up before we could ask any more questions. He didn't answer the phone when we called him back. Betsy, I'm afraid he might do something stupid. What happened between you two? I tried to get Harvey to get out of his empty nest rut and enjoy life with his wife. I decided to do something crazy to get him out of his depression. I pretended I was going on a date with another man. I wasn't home for 10 minutes. 10 lousy minutes. When I returned, he was no longer there. Today, I found out that he has done some things that look like he is going to divorce me. I'm trying to find him to stop this madness, but I can't reach him to talk to him. So, it's your fault that my son is planning to kill himself. Let me say something. If he dies, I will hold you personally responsible. Click. Betsy couldn't think clearly. She called all the local hotels and motels. Harvey was not listed as a client in any of them. Betsy called the police and tried to file a missing persons report, telling them she was afraid he was going to commit suicide. This information had no meaning. She would have to wait one more day before reporting it. Betsy took sleeping pills to help her sleep, although the thought of suicide if Harvey died crossed her mind. Luckily, she knew the code to the safe where Harvey kept his automatic pistol and ammunition. She woke up sleepy and turned on the news on TV. A local news channel broadcast a live interview from the scene of the accident. This is Lamar Jackson from TV3 News. It appears that Bender's Curve claimed another victim or victims last night. We're here with Sergeant Cantor, State Police. Sergeant Cantor, can you tell us exactly what happened? It looks like the car drove off a cliff. You can see that he has passed the strongest part of the reinforced barriers. The driver was either unlucky or he knew what he was doing. What is known at the moment? Given the lack of signs of braking, it appears that the driver may have lost consciousness, been under the influence of alcohol or drugs, or may have committed suicide. How did you even know there was an accident? The police were called by a driver driving in the opposite direction. He's here now. The camera switched to the young man. The reporter approached him. Young man, what is your name? I'm Sean Carpenter. Am I on TV? I just want to say hello to my mom. Hello, Mom. He smiled from ear to ear. Sean, tell us what you saw. Well, I was driving home when I saw this big truck heading my way. He swerved a little and then moved into my lane. I slammed on the brakes, and he suddenly swerved to the right very quickly, hit the guardrail, and went off the cliff. Can you describe the truck? Certainly. It was a red Ford F-150, probably a 19. It had a Western Kentucky Mountain Man sticker on the rear window. Did you see who was driving? No, the truck's headlights were on, and I only caught a glimpse of the man behind the wheel. He looked like a man. I don't think there were any passengers there. That's all I know. Thank you. Sergeant Cantor, did you call for help to find the truck that crashed into the fence? Well, we don't know for sure what it was that broke through the fence. We assume it was a truck, as Mr. Carpenter reported. From here, it is impossible to see what it is. We have a search and recovery team in the mountains, but they are currently conducting search and rescue efforts in another part of the state. I don't know when they'll be able to go down there and check. But what if someone is still alive down there and needs medical attention? Then you will witness a real miracle. No normal person could survive such a fall on these stones. I would not risk the lives of those who are not qualified to attempt an expedition just to find out. We just need to wait for the mountain rescue team. Betts didn't have to wait to guess what had happened and who was dead. She started crying as soon as they said, "Red Ford F-150 with a WKU Hilltopper sticker." She ignored the ringing phone. She was already in her third hour of sobbing alone before the twins appeared. When she didn't answer their call, they became worried and rushed back home to be with her. Their grandmother called and told them the news on TV about the red F-150. Despite the absence of a body, they were almost sure that it was their father who crashed. The older twin answered her mother's phone and handed the phone to her. The identification line included the name of the law firm. "Hello, this is Betsy Strickland." She almost couldn't pronounce the last name due to suffocation. "Mrs. Strickland, my name is Chris Andrews. I'm an attorney in the same office where your friend Doug works. Your husband hired me to represent him in his divorce proceedings. I probably shouldn't have called you, but Doug talked me into it. I was contacted by Riverton Police from Caldwell County. They were called to the scene of a robbery. The defendant suffered a head injury. His wallet and keys were stolen. He was taken to the emergency room and went into surgery shortly after. The unknown person was put into a coma to relieve pressure on his brain. The only thing he had on him was his motel room key. They traced him to Harvey Strickland. Among the papers in his hotel room is a copy of the divorce agreement that made me responsible for his divorce proceedings. That's why they called me. Your husband ordered me to handle the divorce because he did not want you to have to deal directly with him in any way. I must tell you that you are not allowed to see him in the hospital. I base this decision on the very clear verbal instructions given to me by Mr. Strickland regarding his relationship with you. Your children, however, can visit him, but I have a say in whether visitors are allowed." "What? He is my husband. Of course I can see him." "I'm very sorry, but the mandate he signed gives me, and only me, the right to make decisions regarding the divorce, as well as regarding his medical care. I must follow his last verbal instructions. If you want to hire a lawyer to fight this, act now." "Wasn't the divorce proceedings canceled because of his condition?" "No, ma'am. I was given clear instructions to pursue the divorce no matter what, although I don't think he foresaw that he would be robbed." "Does this mean that all financial insurance and beneficiary actions he has taken will not be reversed?" "Yes, ma'am. They were all completed by him, and at this point I see no evidence that he wants them to be canceled." "Of course, there is no such evidence. He's in a coma. This is ridiculous. I deceived my husband into believing that I was going on a date with another man. When I came back to tell him it was a joke, he had already left. He got rid of his cell phone so I couldn't tell him it was a joke. There is no reason for the divorce and no reason for the actions he took regarding the joke. I don't mean any disrespect, but that's what you're saying now." "I must follow what Mr. Strickland instructed me to do and confirmed in writing. I do not have any other choice. I hate to tell you this, but tomorrow you will be served at work as Mr. Strickland requested. Once you get a lawyer, ask him or her to contact me about how to proceed. I don't care. He's my husband and I'm going to see him if I want. I forgot to tell you. The envelope you receive contains a restraining order ordering you to stay at least 1,000 feet away from him. The petition he proposed is very generous. He stated that he wants you to have a chance with the man you really want now." Betsy told the children what the lawyer said. It was impossible to believe what happened. Betsy said she would go to the hospital no matter what they said. The girls agreed to accompany her. It didn't take long. The hospital did not have a copy of the restraining order, but was not allowing any visitors due to COVID restrictions for all hospital patients. They said that once he was transferred to the intensive care unit, he would be able to have visitors, but only one person for 10 minutes every 2 hours. Betsy and her daughters returned home unsatisfied. By the time Harvey was admitted to the intensive care unit, the restraining order had already been granted. One daughter could visit him, but what good would that do? He was unconscious, and if he understood anything, they were saying. They couldn't say it. A few days later, the mountain search and rescue team found the truck. It was assumed that the robber was the dead man behind the wheel. Harvey's wallet was there, but several hundred of the $6,000 were missing. This was probably due to the discovery of several bottles of rare Kentucky bourbon. One was more than half empty. As time went by, Betsy found herself in a difficult financial situation. Harvey forgot to deposit his check into the couple's joint account, which paid the mortgage and other bills. Betsy actually hired a lawyer who asked the court to give her access to half the money remaining in the account. Finally, it's time to bring Harvey out of his drug-induced coma and into consciousness. When he woke up, he said he didn't know who he was. The diagnosis was temporary amnesia. Linda, one of the twins, brought photographs and recalled memories to jog his memory. All efforts were in vain. He also did not remember the lawyer who had his power of attorney. In his condition, he was not considered sufficiently knowledgeable to allow the restraining order to be lifted. When Harvey came out of his coma, he was given a memory test to see if he had amnesia. Harvey quickly realized that this was exactly what they were doing and immediately decided to pretend. He was told that his daughters wanted to see him. Carol, the other twin, was the first to see him. He asked her who she was. "Dad, I'm one of your daughters, Carol. You were attacked and fell into a coma. We were waiting for you to wake up." "We?" "Yes, Linda and I and Mom, your wife." "I have a wife?" "Yes." "Why isn't she here?" "She is not allowed to come. You two had a misunderstanding and there is a restraining order against her." "Oh my God, does she really want to harm me?" "No, Dad. She poses no threat to you. You were really angry at her." "Because of which?" "She pretended she was going on a date with another man. Before she came back to tell you it was a joke, you left and started divorce proceedings. Now that you're awake, you can undo all this." "How do I know she didn't go on a date?" "She says she didn't do it." "Didn't you just say that she said she was going on a date?" "Yes, but it was a lie." "So she lied about being on a date, but then turns out to be telling the truth about not going on a date." "I may not remember you and her, but I'm not a fool. I have to assume I took action to protect myself." "Sorry, miss, but your 10 minutes are up. You'll have to leave right now." 2 hours later, his second daughter arrived. "I talked to you before, didn't I?" "No, it was my twin sister, Carol. I'm Linda. Don't you recognize me?" "I'm sorry, but not yet." "You and your sister are very attractive young women. Were we on good terms? I understand that your mother and I were separated." "We are on good terms. Your mother played a prank on you, and you were attacked and suffered a head injury before she could tell you it was a joke. You started taking steps towards divorce before you even knew about it. You have to stop this, Dad." "I do not know what to do. I don't know if you are my daughter or not. I don't know who my wife is, if I even have a wife. I don't think I should do anything before I get my memory back, if it does. Do I have a lawyer?" "You have 2 of them. One for regular cases and one for divorce attorneys. You gave him permission to divorce. Maybe if I talk to him, it will help me refresh my memory. Can you contact him or her and ask him to come and visit me?" "Certainly. Anything that can bring back your memory." "Dad, can you let Mom visit you? It kills her that she can't see you and apologize. I don't think I would feel safe around her. Maybe later." "Mr. Strickland, I'm Chris Andrews, your family law attorney. Do you remember me?" "Is everything we talk about confidential?" "Undoubtedly." "Fine. I don't have any amnesia. I'm trying to figure out what to do about my divorce. What I remember is that I told you to give her more so that she could move on without me. It's right. She was served and given a lawyer. Do you want to terminate the contract and end the divorce?" "No and no. Can you investigate her supposed lack of a date and let me know what you find?" "I can hire someone on your behalf if you allow me to do so." "Do it." Harvey continued to pretend that he had amnesia and continued to talk to his daughters, ignoring their pleas to see their mother and stop the divorce. He was waiting for a report from his lawyer. The report arrived a few days later. According to private detectives, there is not enough evidence to prove whether she went on a date or not. The man she was with swears nothing happened, but he is married and may be afraid to tell the truth. It's up to you whether to believe her or not. I was afraid of this. Thanks for the info. I think it's time for me to get my memory back. I want you to continue with the divorce process. Carol was the only one who heard him say her name from memory. Soon after, he told her that memories came flooding back, including the night of Betsy's betrayal or deception, depending on what you believe. He agreed to meet with Betsy. After hugs and tears, Betsy began, "Harvey, it was a trick, a sneaky trick on you to get you to change. Doug and I only drove around the block, but by the time we got back, you were gone. How do I know this is true? I can get Doug to come and tell you. He was the one who helped me pull off this trick. So, I have to take the word of the man you cheated on me with to convince me that you didn't cheat on me. Sorry, but this dog doesn't hunt. I tried to call you, but you left your phone at home. I sat waiting for you all night, but you never came back. Was anyone there while you were waiting? Doug stayed there for a couple of hours and then went home. For some reason, I'm sure that he will vouch for you. I waited for your call until the next day, when I called you at the office. That's when I learned that you took a scorched earth approach to my fake romance. You looked like you couldn't wait to get rid of me. Why not? You told me right to my face that you were going to deceive me. You said you wanted another man who stood in front of me in my house. I was devastated, but because I loved you, I wanted to give you what you wanted as soon as possible. Besides, I no longer wanted to be married to you because you no longer kept our marriage vows. Why prolong the agony? Let's go ahead and get a divorce. I don't want a divorce. I didn't plan to really cheat on you and never did. I wanted to encourage you to fight for me and bring some life back into our marriage. Clearly, I chose the wrong way to do this. I'm sorry. Please, Harvey, stop the divorce and let's get back to our lives. I love you. Even if what you said is true and I still don't believe it, you played a cruel, vile joke on me. I don't know if I want to stay married to a woman who does these things. I am currently continuing the divorce process and will be moving into my own apartment when I leave the hospital. Harvey, this is such a waste of money. You have a home and a bed. I'll move to another room in the house for a while if that's what it takes to get you back. Visiting time is over, and I want to see my daughters. Betsy was sent out of the ward. The twins tried to support their mother's cause. Neither of them could explain how much time their mother spent with Doug that night, so it didn't matter to Harvey. When it was time for him to check out, he actually moved into an apartment near his work. The divorce continued until it got to the point where Betsy's lawyer demanded mandatory counseling for them. 12 sessions. Harvey offered no resistance. Betsy went first. I love my husband very much. We had a wonderful marriage and raised 2 wonderful girls together. I think empty nest syndrome hit him harder than it did me. I wanted to fill this gap by spending more time with him doing different things, rather than just physically being together in the same house. Harvey seemed to have moved away from our marriage. Our sex life remained the same as when we had to plain sex at Tim's, when the girls were unlikely to hear. Their absence didn't change anything for Harvey. I decided to shake him up so that he would pay more attention to me. I convinced a male friend from work to join me in what I called shock therapy. One evening I pretended to go on a date with him. My beau and I drove around the block so I could come back and tell Harvey it was a joke to get him angry about our marriage again. When we returned 10 minutes later, he was gone, and I had no chance to talk to him. I waited until the next day when I called his office and found out that he had taken several steps to divorce me. It was a few days later when I found out that Harvey had been robbed and was in a coma. When he came out of his coma, he didn't believe that my fake date was a ruse, and I wasn't actually going out with other men. He has been seeking a divorce ever since. I apologize for my wrong actions and beg him to give me a second chance. Harvey, what's your summary of what happened? She's accurate in some of what she said, but she left out a few details. When her boyfriend showed up, she not only told me she was dating him, despite my objections, she said she hoped to spend the night having sex with him. At that moment, I knew my marriage was dead. I assumed it was my fault that our marriage failed, so I wanted to leave as soon as possible. I left my home and hers so she could have the man she wanted and I could start over too. I took steps to quickly separate us. I gave power of attorney to a lawyer because I didn't even want to think about Betsy anymore, let alone talk to her. I would give her a generous divorce and move on with my life. I didn't know that they were going to rob me, and I certainly didn't expect that I would be in a coma. When I came out of the coma, I didn't remember who I was. Sometimes I wish I had stayed in the coma and regained my memories of that night. Betsy says she didn't actually go on the date but doesn't provide any evidence. In my opinion, it's just as likely that she actually went on a date and slept with this guy, Doug. I think she only changed her mind when she realized what all this would mean for her socially and financially. Now I'm being asked to believe that it was just a joke, and I have to go back to live with a woman who didn't mind breaking my heart. Even if she is telling the truth, she is a wife who has proven that she is ready to hurt me whenever she sees fit. How can I live with this? Every evening when I come home, I have to worry about what awaits me. A loving wife or a cheater going on a date? It would be cleaner if we divorced. She and Doug can have a life together and I can try to move on. It seems we have something to talk about. Everything was at a standstill until Betsy brought Doug to a session. Harvey, I want to apologize for my participation in the prank. Betsy assured me that everything would be fine. I was very doubtful when she got into my car. I swear we only drove around the block before we got back to the house. She was shocked to hear that you had left. We learned that you abandoned your phone when we found it in your room. I stayed with her, waiting for you to return. Most of the time she complained about what we did and how much you meant to her. After a while, I left. Once again, I apologize. Do you believe me now, Harvey? His words certainly sound sincere, but maybe he's just a good actor. Harvey, there seems to be nothing I can do to prove to you that it was just a joke. Regardless of precedent, I will never make fun of you again. Can't you just trust me? Let's watch. You lied to me that night when you told me you were going to spend the night with Doug. Then you claim that you didn't do anything. You repeat that you are not lying now. Next, you want me to believe that you will not do anything like that again in the future? How do I know where the lie is and where is the truth? It all comes down to trust, Harvey. If we want to get back together, you'll have to trust me. If you can't do this, I will agree to divorce you. The advisor spoke. I have a suggestion. How about a postnuptial agreement that stipulates that if Betsy does this again, you get all the property in the divorce? Would you be willing to sign this, Betsy? Yes. Harvey, I think I could try. Betsy came over and hugged him. Harvey slowly integrated back into his marriage to Betsy. Quite a long time passed before she and Betsy found themselves in the same bed. Their interaction was very fragile. Over time, they developed a relationship that included more walks, doing household projects together, visiting their daughters, and traveling. Their sex life was more active than before the incident. Betsy began to feel comfortable at home. One day, Harvey called and told Betsy not to cook dinner. It looked like they were planning to go somewhere. He had to hang up quickly, so Betsy didn't know for what reason. She did remember the reorganization going on at his job due to the merger. Betsy assumed that he had received good news about his position after the reorganization. Harvey entered the house and immediately went upstairs. "I'm changing for tonight," was his comment on the way. Soon after, the doorbell rang. Betsy opened it. Standing in front of her was a woman who looked about 10 years younger than them. She was very attractive and dressed professionally. "Yes, can I help you?" "I'm here because of Harvey. We're going to a place tonight." Betsy remembered the incident that she tried to forget. She thought he was finally trying to get revenge. An idea appeared on what to do. She invited the woman to come in. "You have a wonderful house, Mrs. Strickland." "Thank you. Excuse me, I'll just be a minute. I need to tell Harvey you're here." She shouted, "Harvey, your companion is here." His answer was unclear. She assumed he said he would be down now. She returned to the woman. Betsy was about to ask her a question when she heard Harvey coming down the stairs. She took action. Betsy wrapped her hands around the woman's throat and began to lightly choke her. "You bitch who steals husbands." The woman, who Betsy took to be part of a reverse joke, began to struggle. Harvey screamed, "Betsy, stop!" "What the hell is going on?" Betsy started laughing. "This time I caught you trying to make fun of me." "What other joke?" "This is my new merger manager, Amanda Briggs." "Amanda, I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over her." Amanda frowned, looking at him. "I like to think that my charges are normal people, both during working hours and during non-working hours. You can say goodbye to your new position if that's what you consider normal. I'll be in the car waiting for you to take me back to the hotel." "Amanda, please give me a chance to explain before I do anything hasty." She ran out the door. Betsy cried, sitting on the sofa. "Thank you very much, Betsy. Just when I thought our marriage was back on track, you are ruining our marriage and my job. Here it is. I'm leaving to try to keep my job. I won't go back and save my marriage." He headed towards the car. Betsy ran upstairs and fell onto the bed, sobbing. "What the hell is going on? What have I done?" About 15 minutes later, Harvey and Amanda returned to the house. He called Betsy to come downstairs. They explained to her that she was being played. Betsy grabbed onto Harvey and screamed that she was so sorry. Later, they went out for dinner and a few drinks. Amanda told how she was afraid she would get hurt, but Harvey's help with the prank was worth it. Betsy finally got to the point where she could share the laughter with the others. When Betsy and Harvey got home, she went to clean up the kitchen before going to bed. Harvey went upstairs. He immediately saw that his automatic pistol, which he kept locked, was lying on Betsy's nightstand. Upon examining the gun, he discovered that there was a bullet in the chamber, and the safety was off. His heart sank to his stomach. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one. Second story. Dorian stood in the long check-in line at the airport, looking at the beautiful profile of his charming wife, Salome. She was one of those rare people whose profile was even more beautiful than the front view. He not only loved her, he adored her. He looked for her for a long time, but she was worth every second of waiting. He couldn't help but smile at the sight of her boyish hairstyle, cute button nose, and chiseled lips. "What's so funny, Dor?" Salome asked him with a soft smile, without turning her head. "It's okay, Sal, you're just amazing," he said proudly, looking at her long, muscular legs, which were beautifully emphasized by her yoga pants. Their relationship had its ups and downs. Dorian was a difficult person. He was a man of principles. Not many people could live up to his high moral standards. Sal was the only such woman. She was a complicated person herself, an uncompromising vegan, a minimalist, an environmental fanatic, and a shelter volunteer. It would be fair to say that if they had not met each other, they would probably have remained single for a very long time. They were introduced 2 years ago by a mutual friend, Betty. Sal and Betty have worked in the legal department of a large advertising agency for the past 10 years. Betty first dated Dorian. The spark between them ignited instantly, but their opposing worldviews and Dorian's complete unwillingness to compromise made the continuation of their relationship almost impossible. However, they ultimately remained good friends. It wasn't difficult for Betty to introduce him to her best friend Sal. They weren't a perfect couple. Dorian was just a vegetarian, not a vegan. He belonged to the right camp, and she belonged to the left. He loved dogs and she loved cats. His Belgian shepherd didn't like her ginger cat. He preferred to spend time alone with her, while she preferred communication, parties, and parties. However, the commonality between them overcame their differences, and love blossomed in the blink of an eye. 10 months after their first date, they got married. In 2 weeks, they will celebrate their first wedding anniversary. Sal stopped using birth control a month ago. They were ready to have children. Dorian worked as a department manager for a large security company, a job given to him by one of his former army commanders. His service was shrouded in secrecy. Whatever he did for his country, he did it very well. He left the service at 27 after suffering too many losses. Despite this, his commanders and contacts were happy to help ease his transition to civilian life. However, he was occasionally called up for active reserve duty. This usually happens 3 or 4 times a year, unexpectedly, but not for long. Luckily for him, it usually only lasted a few days. His friends and family knew not to ask any questions. Sal's upcoming trip was related to her work and was a very joyful event. Once a year, her company vacationed for 4 days and 3 nights at an all-inclusive resort, employees and spouses. In addition to 24-hour free alcohol, there were day and night parties with DJs, stand-up shows, small island tours, and special attractions. The company's management spared no expense. Dorian smiled adoringly at Sal when his phone rang. His smile disappeared when he noticed the ID number on the screen. "Do not answer!" Sal screamed hysterically. He scrunched his face in agony and shook his head, but pressed the phone to his ear. Yes, I understand. I'm already on the road." "No," said Sal. "I'm so sorry," Dor whispered honestly. "You know I have to go, but hey, have fun for both of us, okay?" Sal nodded, clearly depressed. He kissed her quickly, turned and left the terminal. Sal followed him with a longing gaze when she felt a gentle hand on her shoulder. It was Betty. "You and I will have the best time of our lives," she promised her best friend. "From now on, you're stuck with me." The flight and drive to the resort were relatively short, and check-in went smoothly. Luckily, Betty and her hotel roommate, Lisa, had a room not too far from Sal's. Sal's breath caught when she saw the breathtaking deep blue bay, perfectly visible from the balcony of her room. The resort's rooms were scattered in rows on the hillside that sloped down to the beach. This is where all the restaurants, bars, clubs, and sports facilities were located. Fortunately for Betty and Sal, their row was not located high on the hill. Otherwise, the climb back up the stairs could be tedious. After a quick shower and change of clothes, Sal met up with her friends, and they went down to the dining room to have lunch. Then they skipped to the bar. They were very excited and in high spirits when they returned to Betty and Lisa's room. Oscar and Ben, the young copywriters who lived in the next room, entered uninvited with mischievous smiles. Oscar pulled out a huge joint and asked if they wanted to celebrate. The girls giggled and nodded in delight. "Where did you get this from?" Betty asked in surprise. "The employee who brought us our luggage asked if we needed anything else," Oscar replied smugly. "This is the mood for the whole time here." Ben set the mobile speaker on the coffee table and set up his phone's Bluetooth while Oscar lit a joint. He took a deep breath and then passed it to Sal. melodious. Techno began to emanate from the speaker as Sal exhaled. A pleasant dizziness overtook her almost immediately. A forbidden thought occurred to her. If Dor were here with me, I would not be sitting in this room with my friends, enjoying the beautiful grass. Dor drew the line at alcohol and was quite strict about it. He hated feeling like he was out of control. I wish he would relax a little, Sal thought. She passed the joint to Betty, nodding approvingly that it was good stuff. Soon they were all chatting uncontrollably, giggling and laughing. Well, almost everyone. While most people become talkative after smoking, Sal tended to withdraw into herself. Adding alcohol to the mix only made her quieter and more withdrawn. She sank into a chair with her eyes half closed, slowly shaking her head and shoulders, enjoying the music and the pleasant massage sensation that ran through her entire body. Ben went to his room and returned with bottles of vodka, lemon juice, and disposable cups that he had bought earlier at Duty Free. Betty made sure Sal got her drink in a glass. Sal didn't accept any plastic. After toasting, they began to slowly dance to the soothing music in the room. Their holiday started off right. Later that evening, a group of 5 people sat around a communal table for dinner. Sal and Oscar were engrossed in each other and couldn't stop exchanging flirtatious glances and smiles. When this continued at the bar, Betty felt like they had lost interest in the rest of the group. Sal was in her room getting ready for the beach party when Betty suddenly walked in. "Care to tell me exactly what's going on between you two?" Betty asked without beating around the bush. "Nothing, actually," Sal answered with some embarrassment. "It's just nice to get a little attention from men for a change. No one dares even look at me when Dor is around. He scares the hell out of them just by existing." "Nothing?" Betty asked skeptically. "I don't mean to sound nasty," Sal said, "but I'm kind of glad Dora isn't here. He's so tense all the time, even when he's pretending to be cool, and it stresses me out. It's nice to feel free for a change and have a little fun. If he were here, I wouldn't be able to hang out with you guys in your room, and I certainly wouldn't smoke or drink more than a glass of wine. He's always so serious and cautious that it's boring. For example, when we sit in a restaurant, he always sits with his back to the wall and nonstop scans the front and back entrances. He thinks I don't notice, but even when he's supposedly talking to me, he constantly looks at other customers and even pedestrians outside the restaurant. Well, today Oscar gives me all his attention. Oscar is not playing the eternal game of agents and spies." "It's not really a game," Betty said sternly. "It's not just that Dor is used to behaving this way. There is a danger that someone might be following him. I know, but he's not here now. He left, and I was left alone. So now I have a few days to really relax. This is my first chance in 2 years to relax a little, and I'm going to make the most of it. Just be careful, okay?" "Certainly." Later that evening, Sal came into Betty's room again. She could hear muffled voices coming from the beach. She wasn't surprised to find Oscar and Ben sitting next to the coffee table, holding drinking cups and smoking weed. When they saw her, their jaws dropped. She wore a short black dress with straps that didn't leave much to the imagination. The 2 stoned men were literally drooling. Sal could hear a bunch of sounds coming from the bathroom. Betty and Lisa were preening there. Oscar offered Sal a drink and a joint. When Betty and Lisa finally emerged, Oscar and Ben exchanged knowing glances. They felt like the happiest people on the island. There was a full moon that night. The beach festivities hardly needed any extra lighting. By 10 p.m., many of the revelers could barely stand. Open bars made everyone too drunk. Betty's company felt much the same. In addition to being drunk, they were slightly overheated. Oscar wouldn't leave Sal's side, and Betty didn't like how Sal let him hug her here and there. Ben desperately tried to make some moves regarding Betty and Lisa, but he was constantly stopped. There was nothing personal about it. They did the same to every man who stumbled and took his shot. No matter how drunk they were, Both Betty and Lisa knew that dating a coworker was a bad idea. As midnight approached, the DJ started playing melodic techno, and the gentle, sensual beat really heated things up on the sandy dance floor. Oscar and Sal slowly walked away from the rest of the group to the edge of the crowd. When they thought they were anonymous enough, they moved closer, and she wrapped her arms around his neck. He responded by wrapping his arms around her waist and placing his hands on the small of her back. In addition to the drinking, smoking, and sensual dancing, there was another factor that made this evening deadly for Sal. Estrogen levels in the body were at a monthly peak. She was ovulating, and so she was very excited. At some point, Sal stopped caring about Dora, Betty, Lisa, or anyone else. All she was fixated on was releasing the pent-up sexual tension that had been building up inside her throughout the day and had reached a truly insane level. When Oscar pressed his pelvis against her, she shuddered so hard that she was afraid she would reach her peak right there on the beach. She turned and pressed her back against him, allowing him to wrap his arms around her hips. He buried his nose in the back of her head, and she felt his arousal. At some point, she just couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed his hand and pulled him along to the shore. When she thought they were far enough from the party, and especially from Betty's prying eyes, she pounced on him with a wet and passionate kiss. "We won't go all the way," she thought. "We will please each other just once and call it a day." "Follow me," she whispered in Oscar's ear. She quickly walked towards the path leading to the stairs, and he followed her. She ran up the stairs without looking up, fooling herself into thinking that if she couldn't see the passers-by, they wouldn't see her either. After she and Oscar reached her room, breathless with both excitement, she had to hand him a magnetic card for the door. Her hands were too shaking to do it herself. Oscar did just fine. Both he and she knew what awaited them there. As soon as the door closed behind them, they began to devour each other. They kissed passionately for some time. The admiration she saw in his eyes pleased her vanity. She dropped all pretense. They had sex, then had sex again, then again some more. They tried every possible position, and she stopped counting how many times she reached the peak of pleasure. The mixture of drinking, smoking, dancing, and sex eventually took its toll. Sal simply collapsed from exhaustion on her stomach on the mattress and began to fall asleep. The next morning, Sal woke up with a terrible hangover, and Oscar was nowhere to be seen. At first, everything was in a fog. She didn't understand where she was. The first coherent thought that came into her head like a poisonous arrow piercing her temples was, "My marriage is over." This terrible thought soon turned into panic. The guilt and shame were more than she could handle. "What have I done?" She wanted to scream, but couldn't. She pulled her hair, but she didn't have the strength. She ran to the bathroom to throw up, but nothing came out. She was so thirsty that she drank rusty water straight from the sink faucet. She then returned to her bed and collapsed. Wrapping herself in sheets, she cried bitterly. After a while, a gloomy thought came into her head and she ran out onto the balcony. "Ha! Slope!" she thought. "It's a fucking slope! I can't even kill myself!" Desperate and broken, she returned to bed and lay there for several hours, without moving. In all the possible scenarios she played out in her head, Dor would eventually find out what happened. The only option was to confess everything, but he probably wouldn't forgive her. Even if he forgives, their relationship will never be the same. Dorian won't trust her anymore, and rightfully so. She didn't trust herself. She honestly asked herself whether she could forgive Dor's betrayal under similar circumstances, and the answer was no. At breakfast, Oscar and Ben learned that they were no longer welcome at the girls' table. They were very disappointed, but did not make a scene. That same day, Betty and Lisa rented a car and drove to the other side of the island to see a landmark called Pink Beach. They discussed whether to invite Sal, but decided not to. She didn't show up for breakfast and lunch, so they assumed she needed time alone. On the way there, they picked up two young Italian fellow travelers. Pink Beach was in a secluded area, about a half-hour's walk from the nearest parking lot. The effort was worth it. The pink sand was not only pleasant to look at, but also incredibly soft. On the way back, they stopped at a vegan restaurant and ordered takeout for Sal. They also managed to get her a couple of pills for the morning. At first, Sal wouldn't open the door for them, but after Lisa nearly broke down the door, Sal relented and let them in. She looked terrible. Disheveled hair, a swollen red face that spoke of many tears, and a stale smell that suggested that she had not taken a shower since the day before. Betty and Lisa pulled their friend into a long group hug. It took a lot of convincing, but Sal finally agreed to take a shower and then eat something. However, she flatly refused to go down to the dining room with them. She didn't want to see knowing glances or hear whispers. Completely sober and unable to sleep, Sal spent a long and painful night. Her mind raced, asking difficult questions and giving no answers. How would she tell Dor? How much will she tell him? How can she convince him that it was a one-time mistake and that she is willing to do anything to make up for the mistake? Finally, after all the mental anguish, she came to a painful decision. She was a practical girl. If she was destined to lose her husband, she had no choice but to move on, despite all the grief she felt. The next day at lunch, Betty and Lisa were surprised to see Sal burst into the dining room in a flowery sundress, looking gorgeous and smiling. However, she avoided looking at the other customers. The dinner went well, and she even joined them for the final party on the beach that evening, but this time she avoided drinking and smoking. At 2 o'clock in the morning, Sal heard a light knock on her door. She didn't sleep. When she opened the door, she was surprised to find Oscar standing alone with a pleading look. She shook her head and closed the door. The next day, Betty, Sal, and Lisa stood quietly in line to check in at the terminal for their flight home. Oscar and Ben, standing behind them, couldn't stop chatting and seemed very happy. At some point, Betty couldn't take it anymore, so she turned around, gave Oscar a sharp look and said, at breakfast, Oscar and Ben learned that they were no longer welcome at the girls' table. They were very disappointed, but did not make a scene. That same day, Betty and Lisa rented a car and drove to the other side of the island to see a landmark called Pink Beach. They discussed whether to invite Sal, but decided not to. She didn't show up for breakfast and lunch, so they assumed she needed time alone. On the way there, they picked up two young Italian fellow travelers. Pink Beach was in a secluded area, about a half-hour's walk from the nearest parking lot. The effort was worth it. The pink sand was not only pleasant to look at, but also incredibly soft. On the way back, they stopped at a vegan restaurant and ordered takeout for Sal. They also managed to get her a couple of pills for the morning. At first, Sal wouldn't open the door for them, but after Lisa nearly broke down the door, Sal relented and let them in. She looked terrible. Disheveled hair, a swollen red face that spoke of many tears, and a stale smell that suggested that she had not taken a shower since the day before. Betty and Lisa pulled their friend into a long group hug. It took a lot of convincing, but Sal finally agreed to take a shower and then eat something. However, she flatly refused to go down to the dining room with them. She didn't want to see knowing glances or hear whispers. Completely sober and unable to sleep, Sal spent a long and painful night. Her mind raced, asking difficult questions and giving no answers. How would she tell Dor? How much will she tell him? How can she convince him that it was a one-time mistake and that she is willing to do anything to make up for the mistake? Finally, after all the mental anguish, she came to a painful decision. She was a practical girl. If she was destined to lose her husband, she had no choice but to move on, despite all the grief she felt. The next day at lunch, Betty and Lisa were surprised to see Sal burst into the dining room in a flowery sundress, looking gorgeous and smiling. However, she avoided looking at the other customers. The dinner went well, and she even joined them for the final party on the beach that evening, but this time she avoided drinking and smoking. At 2 o'clock in the morning, Sal heard a light knock on her door. She didn't sleep. When she opened the door, she was surprised to find Oscar standing alone with a pleading look. She shook her head and closed the door. The next day, Betty, Sal, and Lisa stood quietly in line to check in at the terminal for their flight home. Oscar and Ben, standing behind them, couldn't stop chatting and seemed very happy. At some point, Betty couldn't take it anymore, so she turned around, gave Oscar a sharp look, and said, "You look very content for a man whose days are numbered. You must disappear as soon as the plane lands. Dorian will take his time until he tortures you to death. With his connections, he might even confess to the murder and still go free." Then she turned to Ben. "He'll probably think you were an accomplice, Ben. I wouldn't be surprised if he was waiting for you at the airport when we land." Both became white as a sheet. They didn't know anything specific about Dorian's military background, but he was still the biggest, baddest guy they'd ever seen. Sal called Dorian and insisted that he not pick her up from the airport since Betty would take her home. Sal thought Dorian would probably know something was wrong as soon as she saw her. She didn't want them to end up in a ditch on the side of the road. Dorian was preparing dinner in the kitchen when Sal entered the house. He dropped everything and ran to hug her and kiss her. He knew something was wrong when she avoided his lips and offered her cheek instead. An hour later, they ate dinner in complete silence. The tension in the air was unbearable. "I have bad news," Sal finally said, her voice trembling. Doctor said nothing as Sal tearfully recounted the entire sequence of events. She didn't hide anything. She repeated and emphasized that this was an isolated incident, a combination of alcohol, smoking, a special day in her menstrual cycle, and that she would do anything to earn his forgiveness and a second chance. She was practically begging. When she had nothing more to say, Dorian stood up and asked gloomily, "You said that Betty and Lisa drank and smoked with you. Did any of them end up in bed with a co-worker?" "No, but—" He didn't let her finish her sentence. He rushed into the bedroom and began packing his gym bag. "No!" Sal shouted behind him. "It's me who has to leave." "Shut up!" he hissed. Once he finished packing, he headed to the front door to find Sal standing there, blocking his way. "Get out!" he ordered. "No!" she begged. "Please, please stay!" He placed his large hand on her shoulder and easily moved her to the side. He was about to open the door when she clung to his hand with all her might and whined. Her tears and pain reached him, and he froze. Sal dropped her hand when she saw his broad shoulders shake. She raised her hand and almost touched his shoulder, but was afraid, so she simply held her hand over his trembling body. She wanted so badly to hug him tightly and never let him go, but she knew that wouldn't help. She knew that if he ever decided to come back to her, it had to be because he wanted it, and not just because of an instinctive reaction to the sound of his wife's pain. He lingered, but eventually left. Dorian was heading to the motel when he suddenly changed his mind and turned around. He needed to hear another side of Sal's story from someone he could trust. He also didn't want to be alone. A cup of coffee was already waiting for him when Betty let him into her apartment. She confirmed all the details from Sal's story and added a few of her own, including Sal turning down an Oscar last night. She told him that Sal had not stopped crying for 2 days, and that at one point she even feared for Sal's safety. She also begged him not to pursue Oscar because he wasn't worth the effort, and said she doubted he would even show up for work on Monday. Dorian sat gloomy for a long hour, silently staring at the floor. Finally, he stood up, went to the guest room, and locked the door behind him. Betty didn't think now was the right time to ask him to forgive or move on. He needed time to digest what he heard. At noon the next day, Dorian had not yet left the room and did not answer her knock. Betty placed the tray of food by the door and told him she was going to check on Sal. Sal was in worse shape than she had been 2 days ago. It took Betty a long time to convince her to eat and drink something. Luckily, she was too weak and apathetic to resist as Betty dragged her into the bathroom. Closing the bathroom door behind her, Betty collapsed on the floor and burst into tears. The two people she loved the most were in a terrible situation, and there was really nothing she could do to help them. Dorian had not yet left the guest room when Betty returned from work the next day. She decided to prepare a dinner that included all of his favorite vegetarian dishes, in addition to a special baked salmon. She smiled to herself with pleasure as she heard his bedroom door open, and then the bathroom door close. He looked almost normal as he sat down at the dinner table. He even smiled and talked more than usual. After dinner, they sat in the living room with a bottle of wine. "What are you going to do?" asked Betty. "I'll get a divorce. Isn't this too hasty? At the first opportunity that she had, she cheated on me. If you hadn't gotten those pills for her, she might now be pregnant with someone else's child. She made a terrible mistake, but she's only human. She won't repeat this mistake again. Damn it, he will definitely repeat it. Once a cheater, always a cheater. Do you really believe this cliché? Yes, definitely. She will never drink or smoke without you. I doubt she'll go anywhere without you other than work. It doesn't have to happen again under the same circumstances. It just has to be the right situation." Betty tilted her head and looked at him questioningly, but he simply looked at her meaningfully and smiled. "Everyone deserves a second chance," she said. "Not a third, but just a second. Sal deserves another chance. I'll throw her to the wolves myself if she slips up again. I've known her for 10 years. She is a good person and she loves you very much. Even good people deceive and do bad things. They don't deserve special treatment. I really think you're wrong about this. Not just about all of us humans, but especially about Sal. We can all make critical mistakes when circumstances go right. Or wrong, I guess. Why didn't you and Lisa make a mistake? You're not even married. Well, not being married, we couldn't make that particular mistake. We certainly had fun, though. But not with your colleagues, and I'm willing to bet you use protection. Always bet on Betty you won't miss," she said mischievously. "I'll tell you what," she said after a pause. "Give her one more chance, at least for a week. If after this week you decide you can't continue, I'll understand. But at least try. For both of you, as well as for me. I love you both so much. I will agree to do everything to keep you two together." "What?" "Anything. I have an idea, but I don't think you'll like it." "Do you want to bet?" Sal stood in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. Betty had already told her that Dorian had decided to give her another chance and would return home that same evening. Hearing the front door open, she turned around cautiously. At first, Dorian stood at the entrance and looked tense. But as soon as he smiled at her, she dropped everything, ran up to him, jumped on him, wrapped her legs around his waist, and covered his entire face with kisses. He tried to avoid it the way one avoids being licked by a loving puppy. He simply patted her on the back affectionately. The dinner was pleasant, and Sal did not feel any displeasure from it. For the first time in a week, she felt happy and hopeful. That night, in bed, he politely rejected her advances. "It's too early for me," he explained, and she understood. She didn't fool herself into thinking that in a moment everything would return to normal. She had all the patience in the world because she had hope. In the days that followed, they went out to dinner and shopping, cuddled on the couch in front of the TV every night, and even kissed lightly. Everything looked promising. However, on Friday night, Dorian dropped the bomb. They were sitting huddled together on the sofa in front of the TV when Dorian suddenly said, "I have bad news." Sal flinched and then looked at him warily. "When Betty convinced me to give you another chance," he said in a cold voice without taking his eyes off the TV screen, "it was on the condition that you would feel my pain." Salome tilted her head to the side in confusion. "The only way for us to move on is if I get even." "I'm sorry. What?" Sal stuttered. "I'm going to spend the weekend with Betty. If you can come to terms with this, then when I get back, maybe we can really start over. She would never dare to hurt me like that. She won't dare. That was my only condition, and she already agreed. I'll leave tomorrow evening and return Sunday evening, and then we can continue." "No, please do not. This is madness. She is my best friend. Please don't do this to me." Dorian stood up and went into the master bedroom, leaving Sal sobbing on the couch. She eventually managed to fall asleep, thinking it was just a cruel experiment. "They just want to test me," she told herself. "This is just some kind of vile revenge. Nothing will actually happen between them." The next evening, Sal stood in her bedroom and watched her husband pack his gym bag. "No need," she whispered one last time before he left the house. She ran to the living room window and watched him get into the car and drive away. Part of her still believed it was just a cruel joke. When she saw him drive away, she took the keys and ran to her car. Dorian had just entered the lobby of Betty's house when Sal pulled up. She parked next to the sidewalk in front of the building and looked up at the windows of Betty's apartment. She saw the dim light in the living room become brighter. She saw shadows of figures flickering on the walls. About 20 minutes later, the lights in the living room went out and the lights came on in Betty's bedroom. Another minute, and the whole apartment was plunged into complete darkness. Sal thought she saw the curtains in the dark bedroom move, but she couldn't be sure. No one heard Sal's painful scream. She returned home in agony, tears streaming down her face. At first, she tried to convince herself that this was the price she had to pay for her infidelity, and tried to think about something else to just pass the time. It was to no avail. My thoughts returned to my husband and my best friend. She imagined them pleasuring each other in bed, Betty's screams of ecstasy. She imagined her husband's adoring face as he looked into Betty's face, smiling contentedly at him. At some point, her self-torture turned into pure madness. She even thought about taking one of the guns in Dorian's safe and shooting them both in the head. But she knew that he had taken the key to the safe with him. He always did this. "Yes, I screwed up big time once," she said out loud, her voice laced with disgust. "But not with my fucking best friend, who also happens to be an ex." She called Dorian on his mobile, but he didn't answer. She then called Betty, but all calls went to voicemail. She even called Lisa, but received no answer. Sal was too out of sorts to realize how late the night was. Each failed call was a painful blow, another part of the conspiracy against her. Finally, in complete despair, she called Oscar. He arrived quite quickly and behaved like a real gentleman. He patiently listened to her desperate cries and explanations, handing her a glass of water. As she settled comfortably on his lap, trembling, he gently patted her shoulder. When she calmed down a little, he kissed the top of her head soothingly, assuring her that everything would be fine. When he saw that the first kiss had helped, he kissed her on the cheek. He certainly didn't resist when she suddenly kissed him passionately. In the bedroom, they repeated all their exercises from their last night together, but this time, it was even more exciting and enjoyable. For Sal, it was revenge sex, and there was nothing hotter. Only after the third time, they both collapsed onto the sheets and fell into a deep, sweet sleep. After some time, Sal woke up from her deep sleep because the light came on in the bedroom. Why does this idiot have to turn on the light when he goes to pee? She turned over in bed and felt a hand touch someone's body. If he's in bed, who turned on the light? She thought in horror. She propped herself up on her elbows and, narrowing her eyes painfully, looked at what turned out to be two figures. After a few agonizing seconds, her sleepy eyes finally managed to adjust to the light. She saw Dorian and Betty standing at the foot of the bed and looking at her naked body. Betty looked furious. Dorian looked down at Sal with pity and disgust, as if he were watching a gazelle being torn apart by a hyena. "You owe me $500, he told Betty. "Yes, I know," Betty answered coldly. "You were right. I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes." Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one. Third story. I, Blake Rogers, have known the three Nelson sisters since I was 10 years old, and at that time they were 8. Wilma, 10, Gail, and 12, Marcy. We lived on the same block and our parents were friends, so I talked to them often. Gail and Wilma were a joy. They were always upbeat, friendly, and very sweet, both similar in appearance to Amy Adams. Marcy was a witch. Although she was beautiful, eventually becoming a full-bodied version of Gal Gadot, and was already on her way to having a curvy female figure even at 12 years old, she was angry, spiteful, and self-centered. If her appearance reflected her personality and character, she would be a modern-day ugly duchess. Although I probably always had a crush on Gail, and sometimes Wilma, I never did anything in elementary school or even high school. I always had the feeling that they saw me more as a cousin or friend they could confide in rather than a potential romantic partner, and I was afraid that I would get shot. This fear was due in no small part to the way Marcy, aka the Ugly Duchess, treated me, always putting me down, calling me names, and sometimes even starting rumors about me. Once, when I complained to my mother about Marcy's behavior when I was 14, she said, "Maybe she likes you and wants your attention." Yes, that's right. The most beautiful, but most snake-like girl in our school, almost 2 years older than me, made my life unbearable because she liked me. Poor mother was delirious. For me, the time Marcy left for college was a happy time, but I could never muster up the courage to pursue Gail or Wilma romantically, as they seemed to continue to only see me as a friend. Perhaps the hardest thing I had to do my senior year of high school was ask Wilma to the prom. Wilma skipped a grade and was the youngest. I didn't have a steady girlfriend, and I didn't like anyone enough to spend the evening and the next day with them, so I didn't plan on going. Wilma had a relationship with a high school student named Humphrey, but he left her a week before the prom, after she had already bought her dress. She came to see me, sobbing, especially since she was elected to the prom court. Gail was prom queen. They were both very loved. If I had gotten my hands on Humphrey at that moment, I would have killed him with my bare hands. Not that that had anything to do with it, but I was the starting linebacker on our conference championship football team and was certainly physically capable of doing it. Trying my best to distract Wilma from crying, I said, "Look, I don't have a date for the prom. I would be delighted to accompany one of the special members of the court to the dance." Wilma immediately stopped crying. "Will you really do this for me?" "Oh, thank you so much, Blake." He kisses me on the cheek and then asks me about the time and activities. After she told me the color of her prom dress so I could buy a matching bodice, she kissed me on the cheek one more time and then hurried home with a smile on her face. Wilma and Gail both looked very, very good on prom night. I was proud to accompany Vilma, but at the same time was completely upset. I would have liked to rip her clothes off and make love to her in the middle of the dance floor, but neither that nor doing it in private was in my plans. While Wilma was her usual friendly self and treated me great, I could tell there was no romantic spark on her part. So by the time we returned from all the post-prom activities the next day, I only received hugs and kisses on the cheek. Luckily, the following weekend at an out-of-town baseball game, I ran into a sultry girl named Lizbeth, who had gone to the same elementary school as me and who was now a senior at the high school. She and I started talking. It was clear that there was a mutual attraction between us, and I almost missed the team bus. I was so engrossed in conversation with her. When I was about to run to catch the bus, she quickly wrote her phone number on my hand and said with a wink, "In case you want to call." Without going into too much detail, Lisbeth and I had a real sexual, although probably not very romantic, attraction to each other. She was experienced and ready, so I didn't have to go off to college as a 19-year-old virgin after a very hot summer. Marcy, Gail, and Wilma graduated from different colleges from each other and from me, and since their parents moved to another state, I almost never saw them again during my time in college. I had a very productive 4 years. I made the honor roll in mechanical engineering several times, had a great social life in a fraternity, including having sex a very reasonable number of times, and enjoyed playing football and baseball. While I had always been fit and strong, I had also matured physically in many ways, and had even grown 3 inches and gained 15 pounds of muscle and lost any semblance of plumpness on my face and torso. Luckily, my best job offer was in the big city where Gail and Wilma's parents now lived, and where everyone else, Gail, Wilma, and Marcy, were also based. I learned about this from my parents, who kept in touch with Nelson, and ended up at a party about 2 weeks after I started working. Wilma was there with her regular boyfriend, Marcy was there with her first husband, and Gail was there alone. After the first 20 minutes, it became obvious that Wilma and Gail were still mega sweet, friendly, cheerful. It was also clear that Marcy was still a total badass and her husband was henpecked, although there was no denying that Marcy was now as beautiful as a woman could be. What changed, however, was the way Gail looked at me. From the second we hugged in greeting, 2 things became clear. My old childhood and teenage crush on her was back with renewed vigor, and the way she looked at me was very different from the way we went to school together. Her sensual touches and glances when communicating with me were not just friendly. Just 2 months after her parents' party, Gail and I became lovers. Within 18 months of that party, we were married, at which point Marcy was with her second husband. Despite Marcy's presence, our wedding and reception were a true joy. The only fly in the ointment was that Marcy got drunk at the reception and quarreled with her husband. As at the reception, family life with Gail was wonderful, except for the forced interaction with Marcy, who I now called Evil Marcy, mostly only in my imagination, but sometimes in front of Gail. Despite how despicable I thought Evil Marcy was, both Gail and Wilma insisted on communicating with her and her husband or boyfriend at the moment. With their forgiving, friendly, and devoted personalities, both Gail and Wilma were oblivious to Marcy's many flaws, and they didn't like it when I criticized her. So to keep the peace, and since I loved Gail and loved Wilma, I stopped complaining about mean Marcy. Unfortunately, I think my lack of grievances related to Evil Marcy began to be interpreted by Gail and Wilma as a change in my attitude towards her, and that I actually liked her. They thought Marcy kept teasing me about being cute. Gail and I had been married 4 years when Wilma and her husband Jack celebrated their 5th anniversary. Gail, and presumably Marcy, although I couldn't believe it, wanted to do something nice for her, so they arranged a weekend trip. Although it wasn't my idea, Gail and Marcy rented a 4-bedroom house near the alpine and cross-country ski area, and their parents Nelson and their 3 daughters and spouses, Marcy was already with her 3rd husband, were planning to spend a long weekend there. Gail, Wilma, Jack, and parents. Nelsonov, we went on Thursday afternoon. Marcy and her husband Wilton were scheduled to leave on Friday morning, and since I had an urgent project that needed to be completed by Friday afternoon, I planned to drive separately from them and then ride home with Gail. On Friday at noon, I received a phone call that complicated my life. "Hello, dear," Gail began the conversation in her pleasant, friendly, loving voice. "How is the project going?" "So far, so good, darling. I'm running the final simulations on the computer now, and if there are no problems, I can leave at 2:30 or 3 as planned," I replied. "This is great. I can't wait to see you," she sang. However, there is a slight complication. Wilton slipped on the ice this morning and won't be able to go, but Marcy is dying to come, and he has no problem with her coming without him, so she needs a ride. "Why can't she drive the car herself?" "There's a forecast for snow, and she doesn't have a four-wheel drive like your Subaru, and she's afraid to drive in the snow alone anyway." In fact, she and Wilton were planning to delay their departure and ask to be with you even before he slipped. "Please, please, please be kind and bring Marcy here. Her house is on your way," Gail pleaded. With a sigh, I said, "Okay, tell her that. I'll pick her up at 3 o'clock. After a series of squeals, thanks, and promises of sexual nirvana, Gail ended the call. I sighed and went back to work. It was snowing quite heavily when I picked Marcy up at 2:58. I wasn't too worried because my Subaru Outback has gotten me through a lot of tough situations. In her typical haughty manner, Marcy ordered rather than asked me to carry her suitcase and cross-country skis to the car, which I reluctantly did, while she struggled to the passenger door in a short skirt and 3-inch heels. "Who the hell wears a short skirt and heels to go to the ski slopes in winter?" I asked myself rhetorically. About an hour into the drive, Marcy began an alarming conversation. "So tell me, Blake, why didn't you always like me?" I decided to be honest. "Because you're evil, Marcy. You always look for the worst in people. You took every chance you got growing up to abuse me, and you've changed damn little, as evidenced by the fact that you're already on your third husband before you're even born." 30. "Well, if you weren't so straightforward, I might have treated you better, but I just liked tugging at your chain since I knew you had a crush on my little sisters." She laughed devilishly. "So, just because I liked Gail and Wilma, that made me fair game to be pursued. I tried to make you a man, not the Boy Scout you were. Look, there's nothing wrong with you, so I must have helped in some way. You didn't help me at all. I became who I am, despite your low blows and meanness," I growled. We continued to fight for the next half hour as the snow continued to accumulate. I didn't try to hit her, and she didn't seem at all alarmed by my comments. Then she said something amazing. "Well, maybe if you showed me a little more attention instead of worshipping the shrines of my sweet sisters, I would be kinder to you." At that moment, she folded her hands on her chest and looked sternly forward. I didn't really have an answer to this. It overwhelmed me. In any case, the snow now required all my attention. After at least 20 minutes of silence, we reached the intersection of the main highway we had been traveling on and the rural road we would take for the rest of our journey to our rental house and ski area. Due to the weather, it took us 50 minutes longer than usual to get to this place. Despite how capable my car was, I had no desire to cross a country road in these conditions, especially since it was already dark, but I was determined to get home, if only to escape evil Marcy and get my sexy award from Gail. But the decision was made without me. At the intersection, there was a state car with flashing lights, and there was a closed gate at the entrance to the rural road, also with flashing yellow and red lights. I got out of the car and talked to the road worker. He informed me that there had been an avalanche on one particularly winding section of the road, and that the road was closed. "You'll need a snowmobile to get through," he stated firmly. We can clear the road by tomorrow afternoon if the snow stops, which should happen within the next hour, he concluded. Is there somewhere to stay here? There's a small motel about a mile from here. If I were you, I would get there as soon as possible, he replied. I thanked him and returned to the car. I broke the bad news to Marcy. Contrary to what I expected and her character, she took the news calmly and did not even blame me. When we got to the motel, Marcy insisted on going to the office with me. There's only one number left. I wanted to forget about it and try the next motel, which was supposedly about 2 miles further, but Marcy snapped, "We'll take it," and put down her credit card. Without making a scene, I tried to talk her out of it, but she was persistent, and at some point she growled, "If you're so weak that you don't think you can keep your hands off me, then go and get me tomorrow. There's a grocery store next door that I'm sure has some wine in it, and I'll be fine." Her arrogance, her belief that I couldn't resist her despite her evil nature, plus the idea that Gail, Wilma, and the parents Nelson, Ov would be upset if I left her here alone. At least they made me ask the owner, "Do you have a cot I can take?" "No, sorry. All the folding beds have already been taken apart, but this room has a double bed," replied the owner. I sighed, took one of the 2 keys he had placed on the counter, opened the door for evil Marcy, and we hurried back to the car. Our number was the last one. I parked where I thought we could easily get out the next day, even if the lot was filled up. I carried our suitcases to the room. "I need to change into something more suitable for this weather," Marcy sang as soon as we entered the room and turned on the heating. "Good idea," I said calmly, although I wanted to say, "Why the hell did you put on that outfit?" She started changing clothes right in the main room. "Can't you keep some decency and at least go to the bathroom to change?" I asked sarcastically. "Okay, you straightforward weakling." She smiled maliciously, picking up her ski pants and sweater and dragging in the bathroom. "There's a nice separate heater in here," she called out as I heard the fan start up before the door closed. After Marcy got dressed and I got what I needed out of my suitcase, we walked into the next building, luckily with boots on, since we had to wade through at least 2 feet of snow, to a small grocery store. "You buy food? I'll bring wine," Marcy snapped. "Yes, boss," I replied sarcastically. She just smiled. I took and paid for the food, enough for dinner, breakfast, and lots of snacks. Marcy did buy wine, too many bottles, in my humble opinion. When we got to the room, Marcy called Gail and Wilma to tell them the news. I also talked to them. After I spoke with them and exchanged kind words with Gail and she expressed sympathy for our plight, Marcy returned to the phone. Her last words, followed by an evil laugh, were, "Don't worry, Gail. I won't ruin your husband for you, even if we have to sleep in the only bed available in this flea motel." "Why did you say that, bitch?" I growled. To calm her down, Marcy chuckled evilly. Surprisingly, Marcy was pleasant at dinner. I'm not much of a wine drinker and rarely love the taste of it, but there was something really good about the particular Pinot Noir she chose. Marcy also let me watch whatever I wanted on TV and kept filling my glass with wine. I had only been drunk twice in my life before, but I didn't care if I got drunk now because it might make time go by faster. Around 10 p.m., Marcy said, "You know that I didn't have any exercise today, and I have to train every day to stay in good shape. Let's practice so that dinner can be digested better," she giggled. "This motel doesn't have a gym," I answered calmly. "Just walking in the snow for 45 minutes will be great exercise." She grinned. "Come on, be an athlete. Let's go." We put on our winter clothes and boots and actually walked up and down the deserted highway for about 50 minutes. Even though my legs were much longer than Marcy's, I had to really puff to keep up with her. It's no wonder she had such a toned body if she trained so intensely all the time. I really felt good when we got back. A little tired, as sloshing through 2 feet of snow can be tiring, but under the influence of the wine and the walk, I was calm. We finished off a bottle of wine, then each showered, dressed in somewhat skimpy but appropriate clothes for bed, and crawled under the covers. I made a big impression on Marcy, laying on one side of the bed and warming it up while she showered, and since she was actually polite and asked if she could take the side I warmed up, I said, "Yes," and she responded with a giggle of, "Thanks." I think she giggled more that night than in all the other years I've known her combined. The combination of the sound of the wind blowing through the motel room windows, our strenuous walk, and the wine caused me to fall asleep. At a safe distance from Marcy, shortly after my head hit the pillow. After some time, I found myself in the middle of one of the most beautiful and realistic dreams of my life. I had sex with Gail. I swear that not only was the feeling realistic, but the accompanying sounds were there too. And suddenly I realized that I was not in a realistic dream, but in reality. Obviously, there was no way to stop at this point. I realized that I had just had sex with my evil sister-in-law. I really wanted to feel bad about this. I knew that he had to get out of this situation as gracefully as possible. Maybe she won't remember now in her sleep. I tried to deceive myself. Within seconds, she was giving me oral pleasure as if it were the last lollipop in the world. I felt her grab the blankets and cover us, bury herself in my chest, and I remember thinking that I should feel guilty and that I should somehow make up for this the next day. But at that moment, my mind was too full of endorphins to do anything other than sigh and pull her closer to me. Then I quickly fell asleep. When I woke up the next morning, the first thing I saw was a naked Marcy coming out of the bathroom, drying herself off, no doubt straight from her shower. I've seen her in a bikini twice already, and both times my spontaneous thoughts really bothered me. But completely naked, she was even sexier. She looked like a goddess. "Wake up, stallion," she giggled. "It's already more than 10 o'clock and the checkout time is noon. We need to have breakfast before we hit the highway and hope the road to the house is clear." While my brain was waking up, I thought, what? Did we really sleep twice last night? Apparently, I was looking at her naked, goddess-like body, thinking, because she broke into a devilish grin and then giggled. "Judging by the expression on your face, it looks like you want a snack on me." Then, without further ado, she stood up and walked closer. I lay on the bed, naked, staring at the ceiling, my mind blown. When Marcy came out of the bathroom, I went and took a shower and then got dressed. While we ate breakfast in our room, Marcy carried on the conversation as if we hadn't had sex 3 times in the last 10 hours or cheated on our spouses. My mind had a hard time coping with it. We took another walk in the snow, repacked our suitcases, and it was already 11:51, so we got into the car and headed back to the road leading to the rental house. When we reached the country road, the gate was open, but there was a sign on it that said 4WD vehicles only. We reached home in about 45 minutes without any problems and were warmly greeted by all the relatives. That day, we split into 2 groups. Parents, Nelsonov, Wilma, and Jack were skiing. Gail, Marcy, and I were cross-country skiing. We met in the house before dark, and the 3 girls. Nelson, we prepared a wonderful dinner, and we drank to our anniversary, Wilma and Jack. Marcy behaved towards me the same way she always did. I had no fear about this, and the feeling of guilt had not yet overtaken me. I slept badly. A feeling of guilt and melancholy began to take over me. Although I was not responsible for the first round, I was responsible for the last 2. I felt like a jerk, because I was. The rest of the anniversary weekend, Wilma Jack passed as planned. The only fly in the ointment was that Marcy was coming back with Gail and me. In fact, I was worrying in vain that Marcy might say something frank. This did not happen. The two sisters chatted innocently all the way. I was lost, wondering what the hell I could do to make it up to Gail and how to avoid contact with Marcy in the future. The next couple of times I saw evil Marcy, she looked no different from the usual one next to me and, as far as I could tell, didn't even hint at what happened in room 15 of the motel. The first signs of spring appeared when, about 10 weeks after the infamous ski trip, Marcy called me at the office first. "Hi, this is your favorite sex toy." She started the conversation so terribly awkwardly. "What do you want, Marcy?" I answered calmly after some delay. "Oh, so it's me, your favorite fuck toy?" She giggled. "Yes, I just saw your name on the caller ID," I replied senselessly. "You're no fun. Anyway, I have good news for you. Should I come to your office? Do you want to meet in the park, or do you want to take me to lunch? Can't you tell me on the phone?" Never. One of these three options. After some delay, I answered by looking at my schedule. "Okay, how about tomorrow afternoon after 1:30 near the Carousel in Grand Park? See you there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon." She grinned and turned off the connection. Luckily, I was busy enough that I wasn't focused on what she might want, so I didn't have any anxiety until the next day. I reached Grand Park at 2:02 a.m. and easily found her sitting on a nearby bench. I knew I wasn't going to like what I was about to hear when she stood up with a big smile on her face and kissed me on the lips. We sat down, she chatted a little about trifles, and then got down to business. "Two pieces of good news, Blake. First of all, I filed for divorce from Wilton." She chuckled. "Why is this good news?" I asked carefully. "Because he'll be out of the picture before the belly comes in and won't get in the way of me raising our son." She grinned like a bushel full of possums. "What can I say?" I choked. "Yes, you really did your job at the motel, had sex with me 3 times during my fertile period, and now I'm pregnant. Great job." After a long pause where I stared at her, trying to determine whether she was gloating or whether she was serious, I finally stammered, "Aren't you serious?" "Of course I'm serious. I told you then that I was in my fertile period and I was defenseless." She grinned. I didn't believe her, but considering how shocked I was at the time, if she said anything, it might well have fallen on deaf ears. However, it explained why she had shut her pussy up after our third fuck. "How do you know it's not Wilton?" I hesitated. "That's for sure. I just had the IUD removed before our trip. I didn't let Wilton fuck me for 2 weeks after I got back, using the excuse that I didn't want him to hurt his back after he slipped and fell. I am estimated to be 10 weeks pregnant, and our relationship was 10 weeks ago, and, drumroll, I just took a DNA test and it's not Wilton, and the only person I've had sex with other than him in the last 6 months is you. Aren't you excited?" She beamed. I put my head in my hands and almost cried. Marcy kissed the back of my head and said, "Don't be a wimp, Blake. I'm going to name our son William Blake Nelson, going back to my maiden name. I'm not going to tell anyone but him when he turns 21. I don't expect any financial commitment. Just teach him how to throw a baseball and stuff like that. Just be friendly and compassionate. That's not too much of an expectation, is it? Why did you set me up, Marcy? Why did you choose me to be the father of your child? With your looks, despite your evil nature, you could choose almost any guy in the world," I groaned. "Stop whining," she grinned. "You are a good candidate. You have the right combination of looks, intelligence, and character to provide good children." "What do you mean by children?" She grinned. "You never know what life holds in itself. Now answer my question. If I don't tell anyone that you are a father and don't ask for financial support, since I'm already rich, will you play ball with our son and take care of him?" I sighed. "As long as you don't tell anyone else, I'm not asking too much. It looks like you've been planning this for a long time, however." "How did you do that?" "I know, but you will never know," she laughed. Now why don't you pull up your big boy pants and invite your baby's mommy over for a late lunch? In an ideal world, no one would ever know or even guess that William Blake Nelson was my son, besides him, when he is 21 years old. And my happy marriage with Gail would be forever, and evil Marcy would only be on the periphery of my life. However, as you know, the world is not ideal. Marcy was the hottest pregnant woman in history. It seemed as if she was born to be pregnant. She gained exactly the right amount of weight, had perfect muscle tone, was glowing, was never sick in the morning, and had a short, painless labor. She told the family that the father was some random guy she had a one-night stand with after she dumped Wilton. And given her story, it seems like everyone believed her. All family members seemed willing to help. I didn't have to interact much with Marcy during the first 6 months of her pregnancy, which was fine with me, both because I didn't like her personality and because I hated the lustful reaction of my nether regions around her. At the beginning of her last trimester, the situation changed. Shortly after she was 7 months pregnant, Marcy talked Gail into inviting me to a Lemaze class with her, and Gail, being the wonderful devoted sister she is, talked me into doing it. It was so damn painful to be around Marcy during Lemaze class, while she put on her pants and absorbed every bit of information she could about the birthing process and parenthood. All the other men in Lemaze's class were drooling at her, especially since she insisted on wearing provocative clothes. I spent most of the class trying to hide my boner. Marcy was not rude to me at this time, but she enjoyed teasing me and kissed my flushed face, saying, "I'm so happy that my child's natural father is with me." Since I was her coach, I went with her to the maternity ward. Fortunately, I did not have to watch the birth process itself, but I was moved when little William Blake Nelson laid in his mother's arms, and the realization that he was mine hit me like a baseball bat to the forehead. Of course, Gail, Wilma, and parents. Nelsonov were also at the hospital and everything went well with the birth. So they actually got to see mom and baby within 2 hours of him being born, while I went to the chapel and cried. Eventually, I started visiting William at least once a week, and when he was little, at least twice. I liked being with him. However, it bothered me that every time I visited him, Marcy would hug and kiss me tightly, which would cause an unwanted, spontaneous reaction in my crotch. Surprisingly, my own mother unknowingly caused my death. I haven't seen any reason to mention this before, but my irises are a very unusual color. They are gray, and less than 1% of the population in the United States has gray eyes. I also have light red hair, which is the least common shade of blonde. My parents were visiting along with the whole clan Nelsonov at my home with Gail one Sunday. I was pretending to be a tickle monster while chasing 20-month-old William when he ran up to my mother and squeezed her legs, while he squealed with delight trying to get away from me. She looked him closely in the face and blurted out, "Blake, he looks exactly the same as you at this age, especially his eyes and hair. He could be your clone." Luckily, I got to William and started tickling him right after that statement. So I thought it might have been lost in his squealing and laughing. However, later that day, I saw Gail holding William while she and Wilma seemed to be looking straight into his face and not smiling. That was a bad sign. A little over 3 weeks after my mother's statement, when I returned home from work, I found Gail crying, sitting at the kitchen table with some papers in front of her and an open FedEx envelope. "What's the matter, dear?" I asked, touching her shoulder. She jerked her shoulder away from my touch and handed me one of the pieces of paper that lay in front of her. It was on DNA lab letterhead, and after some illegibility, in the middle of the page it said in bold letters, "Specimen A and Specimen B are closely related. Most likely Specimen A is the biological father of Specimen B." And with that single sentence, my happy marriage to Gail Rogers, née Nelson, collapsed. Of course, the whole marriage didn't really end in one day or even in 6 months. but that's when it died on the vine. I tried to salvage it, but despite Gail's loving and usually forgiving nature, it was too much of an insult for her. Marcy even did the first selfless act I've ever seen in her life and tried to take all the blame on herself. It didn't work. Within a year, I received my documents after agreeing to split the assets 70-30 in Gail's favor, in an attempt to ease my conscience. Shortly after my divorce, I moved to a city 500 miles away. While the main purpose of the move was to get away from the family, Nelsonove, and the crushing memories of my fall from grace, serendipitously, I also got a better job as a mechanical engineer overseeing some complex projects. Even with only 30% of my family assets, with the increased income from my new job, I easily got a mortgage on a nice 3-bedroom house in a nearby suburb of the big city I was working in. On the second Saturday, in my new home, there was a knock on my door around noon. I didn't really have a chance to get to know my new neighbors because I was working a lot, so I was very surprised that someone knocked on my door. I opened it and saw Marcy holding almost 3-year-old William. He shouted, "Daddy," and practically rushed at me. I caught him and showered him with kisses as I entered the house. Marcy followed us. I played with William while Marcy and I chatted about nothing in particular except what concerned William. I mouthed to Marcy, "Why are you here?" She mouthed, "We'll talk when William goes to bed." 2.5 hours passed when I put William to bed in the new double bed I bought for the guest room. When we got back to the living room, the first thing Marcy did was slap me. I was about to ask what it was about, but she answered before I could. "Did you even think about your child before you ran away with your tail between your legs? And why didn't you tell me about your plans, bastard?" she growled, raising her hand to hit me again. I grabbed her wrist. I needed to start all over again. "I didn't think you'd ever leave your family and your real estate business, and we don't like each other enough for me to ask you to move," I replied quietly. "You're so stupid. You want everything written out for you in big red letters. I'm shocked how you can live your life," she screamed, but not loud enough to wake William. "Don't you know that I love you?" were her last words before throwing herself at me and bursting into tears. I was shocked. I instinctively hugged her. When she finally stopped crying, she pulled away, walked into the living room and sat down, crossing her arms over her chest. I sat down next to her. "I regret my outburst. I know you think I'm evil, Marcy, and I didn't plan on taking it out on you when I came here. I've already cashed out my real estate business. I came to force you to accept one of 2 offers," she said sternly. "Okay, I'm listening. First, I'm moving in with you and we're raising William together. If you find that you can't stand me, you can kick me out after a 6-month trial period, and you don't have to think about marrying me no matter what." Then she took a deep breath and continued. "Second, I'll move into an apartment nearby and sue you for child support, but you'll still have to be in William's life." Then Marcy turned her head and fixed me with a steely gaze. We both stared without blinking for a very long time. I learned my lesson. She moved in, and 6 weeks later she announced that she was, surprise, pregnant again. This was 7 years ago. Marcy and I have been married for 6 years. She goes through periods of bitchiness, but motherhood has really changed her for the better. Now, I really like her a lot, and I love my boy and girl to death. Amazingly, I'm now convinced that she really loves me, and I might really love her too. I don't want to overanalyze my feelings because I'm very happy with the current situation and don't want to rock the boat. He has been friends with 3 sisters since childhood. He likes 2, but considers one to be evil. Over time, he marries one of those he liked. They are going to a party in the mountains with the whole family on the occasion of one of their sister's anniversary. His wife asks him to take his evil sister to this party since her husband injured his back and she is afraid to drive in the snow. An avalanche hits the road and they get stuck in the same motel room. She fucks him in his sleep, then twice more in reality. She divorces her husband and gives birth to a son from him. She does not claim his life, but asks to be present in her son's life. At a family party, his mother recognizes the child's features as her son. Her suspicion was heard, and his wife did a DNA test. They are getting divorced. He starts his life anew, and she appears on his doorstep. She tells him that she loves him and wants to try to live together. Soon, he gives birth to a daughter. 4 of 5.